Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We will get you the top stories from India and the region. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague Ollie Barrett in London. How are you today, Ollie?
Couldn't be better, thank you, Shubhendu. It's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, a former US president is now a convicted felon. Developments over Ukraine's use of Western-supplied weapons, and the latest from South Africa's election. First, the headlines.
Donald Trump pronounced guilty in the hush money criminal trial, becomes the first former US president to be declared a convict, even as he runs for presidency again. Kremlin hits out after President Joe Biden gives Ukraine permission to carry out limited strikes in Russia, says Ukraine has already been targeting Russian territory with US-made weapons. Europe remains divided over weapons use clause for Ukraine. World's largest democratic elections moves towards conclusion. Seventh and last phase of India's parliamentary polls to take place on June 1st. A US court has found Donald Trump guilty in hush money trial. After 2 days of deliberations, a 12-member jury pronounced the former US president guilty on all 34 charges. Trump became the first former US president to be declared a convict as he runs for presidency in November elections. The judge has set July 11th as the date of sentencing. It will come just days before the Republican Party officially chooses him as its nominee. Trump will not be jailed ahead of sentencing. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. A lawyer representing him says that they would appeal as quickly as possible. Donald Trump expressed outrage at his conviction and maintained his innocence. Trump's been calling the trial a scam, vowing to appeal against the decision.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. I'm fighting for our country, I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting, we'll fight till the end, and we'll win. Because our country's gone to hell.
On to our next big story. Moscow has said its forces are advancing in all tactical directions in Ukraine and have taken control of 28 settlements this month. 3 people were killed, 16 others injured after a Russian missile destroyed a power facility and power grid in Kiev on Friday. Regional governor said that S-300 missiles were used in the attacks that occurred at midnight local time. Russian air defense systems destroyed a Ukrainian drone over Tatstan region. 2 airports in Tatstan suspended operations for more than a couple of hours on Friday for safety reasons. US President Joe Biden has given permission to Ukraine to strike inside Russian territory with US-made weapons. Biden said Kiev can only hit targets over the border close to Kharkiv in what the US characterizes as acts of self-defense. The move follows Kiev requesting Washington, D.C. to change its policy a few weeks ago. And after the US authorizing Kiev to use US-supplied weapons against Russia, Kremlin has hit back, says that it was already aware of attempts being made by Ukraine to strike Russian targets using weapons provided by the United States. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said, while they don't know about the details of Biden's decision, The reported step shows how deeply Washington is involved in the conflict. And DD India correspondent Dasha Chernyshova joins us live from Moscow. Dasha, what is the latest on the advances by the Russian forces in Ukraine?
Well, indeed, the Russian Ministry of Defense claims it has been making steady advancements on all tactical directions in Ukraine. We also understand from Andrei Belousov, who has been recently appointed as Russia's defense minister, that since the start of 2024, the Russian armed forces have managed to take control of 880 square kilometers in Ukraine. And in May alone, he says the Russian armed forces have managed to take control over 28 settlements. Those include the Kharkiv direction that has been opened most recently, with the Russian forces trying to create the so-called buffer zone in that area. We also understand that the Ukrainian army, according to Moscow, has lost over 35,000 servicemen in May alone, as well as 2,700 units of the military equipment. So according to Moscow, the operation is ongoing, with the goals expected to be achieved by the Russian military one way or another. And they continue to say that what's happening at the moment is the West fueling this conflict by supplying more weapons to Ukraine.
And just on that, Dasha, divisions are surfacing in the West over the weapons use policy for Ukraine. Kremlin says Kiev has been targeting their territories already. What more can you tell us on this?
Well, indeed, Moscow regards these steps as the further escalation of the conflict in Ukraine. That does speak a lot about the further involvement of NATO countries into this conflict. The Russian officials, both the Russian president, his spokesman, as well as the foreign ministry, have been speaking over the past days, suggesting that it is impossible to use long-range, high-precision weapons that have been supplied to Ukraine without the satellites data from the Western countries. So that's why they say they know that these attacks have already been carried out with the support of those Western countries. But what they say is happening now is further escalation by those Western states that do want to inflict what Moscow says is a strategic defeat against Russia on the battlefield. In the meantime, the officials here insist that no matter if there is any permission or not, Russia will continue its operation and its course will not be deviated or one way or another altered because of that permission. So Moscow is quite certain that it is going to achieve the goals. In the meantime, saying that the result of such actions by the Western countries could be quite detrimental because it is undermining not just the global security, but also brings the world closer to the potential conflict between Russia and NATO countries.
Dasha, thank you for those updates. Divisions in Europe are becoming more evident over the weapons use policy for Ukraine in its conflict against Russia. Let's turn to my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett, to learn more about these developments. Ollie, Germany agrees, Italy disagrees.
That's what it amounts to, Shibendu. Yes, Germany on Friday announcing the Ukrainian army can use weapons supplied by Berlin to defend itself against Russian attacks. A German spokesperson saying that under international law, Ukraine has the right to self-defense. That statement came after days of scrutiny on German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's government over its stance on allowing or not Kiev to use German weapons in that way. Now, on the other hand, Italy has denied permission to Ukraine to use its weapons to attack targets inside Russia. The Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani says that Italy is constitutionally prohibited from allowing that and wants to bring peace in the conflict by supporting Ukraine to defend its own territory against Russia. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed a bilateral security agreement with Sweden. It's one of 3 planned deals with Nordic countries as he seeks more military support from the West in the conflict against Russia. And DD India's Megami Lim joins us live now from Kiev. Megami, mixed news then for Ukraine from US and European allies. What does it all mean for Ukraine's efforts in repelling Russian attacks?
That's right, Ollie. Well, first of all, I think it's very, very important to note that both the United States and Germany are Ukraine's top two biggest donors of weapons and military aid. And this means that Ukraine can now tap into weapons supplied by its top two donors to strike at military targets inside Russian territory. Ukraine will be able to fire back at Russian military hardware and equipment just across the border from Ukraine. They will be able to shoot down Russian missiles and also Russian troops massing on the border. These were things that Ukrainian troops couldn't do just over 2 weeks ago when Russian forces were massing on the border near Ukraine's northeast Kharkiv region, and then they were able to mount a major ground offensive there. And Ukrainian military officials have also been warning for days now that there are Russian troops also massing on the border further up north in Ukraine's northern Sumy region. And Ukraine has been saying that their hands are tied, that they can see the buildup, but they're not able to use Western supplied weapons. But now that the restrictions have been lifted, this is significant for Ukrainian forces. Now, both the United States and Germany have been very clear that the lifting of restrictions only apply to certain types of weapons, such as artillery shells and certain types of rockets, but the restrictions remain for longer range weapons. For example, the US supplied long range ATACMS missiles that are able to fly as far as 300 kilometers. Both the United States and Germany has said that this restriction was only lifted for areas near the Kharkiv region. But again, as Ukrainian forces continue to be outmanned and outgunned on the battlefield, this policy shift will be useful for Ukrainian forces in repelling Russian attacks in the future.
Megami Lim in Kiev, thank you. And I think we can hear now from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
We will sign 3 new security agreements. Ukraine plus Sweden. Thanks so much. Also with our Nordic partners, Norway and Iceland. And together we will discuss our next steps together. Air defense, like you said already, Prime Minister, and weapon production and our diplomacy. You can see that Russia is trying to expand the war and disrupt the peace summit, and we are preparing. It is also evident that Russia is preparing for provocations in the Baltic region against borders in the region. Only together we can stop the madness from Moscow.
Now, NATO foreign ministers have gathered in Prague for an informal meeting to discuss ways to bring more military aid to Ukraine and work out details ahead of the alliance's July summit. Volodymyr Zelensky, by the way, says that July summit should be used to advance his bid for Ukraine's NATO membership. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says NATO's alliance is stronger, bigger and better resourced, but also says it must prepare for coming challenges.
We have an alliance that is stronger, it's bigger, it will be even better resourced. And that's critical in facing the challenges of this time and coming years. As Jens said, in Washington for the 75th anniversary, of course, we'll be celebrating the 75 years of our alliance, the most successful alliance in history. But even more important is what we're doing to prepare the alliance, strengthen the alliance for the next 75 years.
The ruling African National Congress Party is in the lead in South Africa's elections, but projections still have it falling short of a majority as results continue to come in. The ANC's won every election since the end of apartheid in 1994, when Nelson Mandela became the country's first black president. DD India's Isaac Lukanda reports from Johannesburg.
As results continue to trickle in here in South Africa, the one thing that is becoming increasingly apparent is the fact that South Africans are yearning for change. Over the last few days, we've had an opportunity to speak to a number of South Africans, and the one common theme there is the need for change. South Africans are calling for an end to the corruption, an end to the electricity shortages, an increase in service delivery, things like water, jobs. These are all things that South Africans have been telling us that they need. And so at this particular point where the polls are showing that the ANC has less than 50% of the majority that it needs to be able to form a government, there's some hard questions that the ANC has to ask itself. And at this point, although we don't know yet, there could be some negotiations, some discussions around what type of coalition will have to be formed for the ANC to continue in power. On the 2nd of June, we expect full results to come out, but that will just be the beginning. From there, if a coalition is to be formed, some serious negotiations that could last a month or two have to be held. And from there, South Africans can begin to pick up the pieces and build the South Africa that they want. Isaac Lukando in Johannesburg, reporting for DD India.
Spanish police have seized forged merchandise and other items worth $6.5 million for sale in the country ahead of the Champions League final this weekend and the European Championships scheduled in Germany next month. The seized goods included fake shirts packed alongside other forged items like luxury watches, leather goods and electronics as well. Police started an investigation after 2 tons of counterfeit shirts from Spanish football clubs sent from China were earlier seized. You might call that fake news, Shibendu. Over to you.
But accurately reporting that fake news. Thank you, Ali, for joining us with those updates. And Iran's former Speaker of Parliament, Ali Larjani, has registered for the country's upcoming presidential elections on Friday, following the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in helicopter crash. The 5-day registration period will close on Tuesday. The Guardian Council is then expected to issue its final list of candidates within 10 days. That will allow for a shortened 2-week campaign before the vote in late June. Former Parliament Speaker Karmei advisor Larjani said that economic development will be one of his priorities if elected. And still to come on DD India Global. US and Chinese defense chiefs lock horn on Taiwan in their first face-to-face meeting in 2 years on Friday at Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken time off for meditation at the iconic Vivekananda Rock Memorial in the southern tip of the country.
The marriage between tech and tradition is what farmers need across the globe. Tech shows us ways to deal with new challenges in a world, while traditional knowledge and varieties show us how to withstand these challenges.
Some people in society look negatively at a woman if she steps outside of her home.
Do you know 700 different crop problems on 30 different crops? Diagnostic, that's tough for a human to do.
Big food manufacturers are getting like the biggest share. Farmers and farm workers, which are like in the bottom of this value chain.
When a volcanic eruption injects ash, dust and gases into the atmosphere, into the stratosphere, they form sulfate aerosols, which the Earth's rotation helps spread around the globe.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. The US and Chinese defense chiefs locked horns on Taiwan in their first face-to-face meeting in about a couple of years on Friday. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and China's Defense Minister Dong Yun met in Singapore on the sidelines of Asia's premier defense summit, the Shangri-La Dialogue. During the meeting with Dong, Austin expressed concerns about Chinese military activity near Taiwan, including after the island's presidential elections. Both leaders also discussed the war between Russia and Ukraine and the conflict in Gaza. Let's now get you the latest on the world's largest democratic elections in India. The seventh and the final phase of India's parliamentary elections will take place on Saturday. With that, the world's largest democratic elections will draw to a close. Voters across 57 constituencies in 8 states and union territories are eligible to exercise their franchise. All 13 seats of Punjab, 4 of Himachal Pradesh, 13 constituencies of Uttar Pradesh, 9 in West Bengal, 8 in Bihar, 6 in Odisha, and 3 seats in Jharkhand, besides the union territory of Chandigarh, will go to polls on Saturday. And Varanasi will vote in the 7th and the last phase of India's elections on Saturday. The city is witnessing a tourism boom, as my colleague Deepika Mato finds out.
It's peak afternoon in Varanasi, but the streets are still bustling with a lot of crowd. Reason being, this is the famous place of Kashi, and secondly, elections are going on. That brings more number of people in the form of rallies, in the form of coverage, and in the form of tourists also to Kashi, and visit all the hotspots and see how they are treating all the visitors here.
Varanasi is all set to go to the polls on Saturday. The temperature is rising every hour, but interestingly, nothing dampens the growing business of Varanasi, and thanks to tourism for that.
After the completion of Kashi corridor, many tourists are coming. We have a good business because of tourists.
This place used to be a barren land earlier, and people used to play kho-kho, kabaddi, etc. Now, after development of Kashi, we have seen a multifold increase in the business.
Not only lassi, Varanasi is famous for kachori as well. And chachi ki kachori, where Bollywood actors, ministers and most celebrities frequently visit, is always bustling with crowds.
After Kashi development, the footfall has increased even more.
Kashinath Baba and kachori and lassi, these are the 3 things, must-do things here.
Varanasi is famous for saris as well. And in one of the shops, the legendary late singer Lata Mangeshkar used to come more often. Now the owner believes that not only development, but the year of election also brings a lot of customers to the shop.
After Kashi's development, the customers are reaching out in large numbers. Especially the current election year is also bringing more customers to the shop.
Well, the days are getting hotter in Kashi, but the streets continue to bustle amidst election.
You can see that how trade is getting a boost amidst the election, defeating all odd barriers like weather and other conditions. With camera person Sanjeev, this is Deepika reporting for DD India from Varanasi.
In all the 4 parliamentary constituencies of Himachal Pradesh, along with 6 legislative assemblies, go to polls on the 7th and the last phase of the general elections, for which polling officials of the state have made required arrangements. Women polling officials of pink booths in the hilly states spoke with DD India on their experience as the facilitator of the world's largest elections.
All the preparations are done for the last phase of the world's largest elections, and right now we are in Kullu in Himachal Pradesh, one of the hilly state of India. And here, different kind of preparations are being made as far as the polling officials are concerned. In fact, given the treacherous terrain at certain parts, in certain parts of the state, the polling teams, most of them have already left and already have set up the polling booths, given the fact that they have to leave in advance and ensure that there is no difficulty at the last moment to ensure that people are able to vote. Some of them who have polling booths in the neighboring areas are already making preparations right now. And in fact, we have a polling team with us. So how seriously are you taking? What are the preparations?
I'm very serious, and all my team members are also very serious, and will conduct this whole process very seriously and without any bias.
That's perhaps one of the most important things. So is all the training and process is in place?
Yes. We had 3 rehearsals and everything was perfect, and we understood everything.
So this is what the polling officials here, the presiding officers, the micro observers, all of them are here in Kullu, and dispatching of these EVMs has already started a day in advance. And now today, just a day ahead of the polls, all of these teams that are going to the neighboring polling booths will also start their journey to set up the polling booth to ensure that the last phase of elections, general elections in India, is conducted in a transparent manner to make this world's largest election a huge success. With camera person Anil Thakur, Akshay Dongre, DD India.
Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken off a time for meditation at the iconic Vivekananda Rock Memorial at the southern tip of the country. Upon his arrival at Kanyakumari on Thursday evening, Prime Minister first offered prayers at the Bhagwati Amman temple before heading to Vivekananda Rock Memorial. Sri Lanka's consumer price index inflation rate fell to 0.9% in May year-on-year from 1.5% in April as per the Colombo Statistics Department. Meanwhile, food prices remained static in May from the 2.9% reported in April. Non-food inflation has increased to 1.3% in May. Inflation is expected to remain within Sri Lanka's central bank target of 5%. Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape visited the landslide-affected Enga region on Friday. He met with families of victims who mourned their loved ones. Hundreds of people died in the landslide. More than 2,000 people were feared buried alive under the debris. A volcano in Iceland that erupted on Wednesday continued to spew lava for the third day. An evacuation order was issued for the natives of Grindavik and a nearby tourist spot. It has been described as the most powerful volcanic eruption since December last year. The Olympic flame landed at the Omaha beach in France on Thursday on its way to Paris. The flame was brought on a small boat with spectators gathering to witness the event. The 2024 Paris Olympics will be held from 26th July to 11th August. That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan this QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Global. Namaskar.